Ever wonder why you keep hitting a wall with your fat loss journey, even when you feel like you're doing everything right? You see, it's not just about diet and exercise. Your mind may also be sabotaging your progress. In this video, we'll uncover the hidden cognitive distortions that could be holding you back from the results that you deserve, and how to finally overcome them and lose fat for good. If you're new here, my name is Adam. I'm a health and fitness coach, and in this channel we turn health and fitness science into practical application. In simple terms, cognitive distortions are just irrational ways of thinking that influence our reality, and at some level we all engage in them. And overcoming them is not just only beneficial, but crucial if you want to lose fat and keep it off. If you can't work on these, it doesn't matter what diet or what supplements or what training you do, it will never ever work. But the good thing is, once you start to recognize them, you'll be able to deal with them more efficiently and more effectively over time. So the first cognitive distortion is faulty cause and effect reasoning. This is where essentially we put the cart before the horse, step over dollars to pick up pennies, if you will, attributing correlation to causation. This is by far the most common mistake that people make when it comes to losing fat, and it is focusing on quality over quantity of food and focusing solely on how clean your diet is. That means trying to focus on eating healthy foods or cutting out certain ingredients or things from the diet in hopes that it will result in fat loss, while also simultaneously neglecting the most important thing, total caloric intake. What that typically looks like is someone is eating a diet with minimally processed foods, a diet with limited junk food, lots of fruits and vegetables, and so on. Or sometimes it even means more extreme scenarios where people are completely banishing or cutting out foods such as sugar, gluten, seed oils, dairy, carbs, fats. Really anything and everything has been blamed. And while of course food quality is absolutely important, not just for health but also for performing well and keeping you full, calorie balance still applies even when you're eating really well. It's a law of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, it can only be transformed from one form into another. If you're 300 pounds and your diet is absolutely terrible, just focusing on quality will likely also reduce the calories that you consume and lead to weight loss. But those who struggle with this one the most are typically those individuals who already feel like they're doing everything right, they're eating well, but they just can't drop body weight. As you get closer and closer to your goal, fine margins become a lot more important. If you're in this situation, I promise that 2 weeks of tracking your calories using something like Macro Factor will really open your eyes and get you unstuck. You can even use the code ADAM14 to go those 2 weeks completely for free. The second cognitive distortion that stops you from losing fat is the planning fallacy. This essentially is where we underestimate the time, resources, or effort required to reach a certain goal. 99% of people that I've ever worked with have had to lose way more fat than they first anticipated. You probably have a certain level of body fat and also have an image or desired body fat goal in your mind. You might think that you need to lose 10, 20, or even 30 pounds in order to achieve that goal, but in reality, doubling that number will likely get you closer to what you actually need to lose. Now this is really important to understand, because if you think you only need to lose 20 pounds and you get closer to that 20 pound goal, but then you realize that you're still way off, you're likely going to lose motivation compared to if you had the full picture before you even started. It's like those advertised salaries on LinkedIn where you see 250k per year, but then you start the job and realize the base salary is actually 70k and you only hit the 250k if you 4x your target. That's really going to piss most people off. Realizing this will also help you see that it's probably going to take you twice as long as you initially thought. And that means planning for things like weddings, vacations, birthdays, and other family events. If you're unsure of what you realistically need to lose and you want an accurate representation, I've created a free projection calculator. It's in the description. That's already been downloaded by hundreds of people. The next one is called magical thinking. The idea that positive outcomes will happen automatically without needing to prepare for challenges, particularly dips in motivation. It's a form of something called emotional reasoning, which means letting your emotions dictate your reality. But you know who else lets their emotions dictate their reality? Dogs and babies. But what else do dogs and babies do? They piss on the carpet. And this happens all the time, the emotional reasoning part, not the peeing on the carpet. You start something new, a fat loss goal, you join a gym, you buy a new supplement. Week 1, you're bursting full of motivation. You've got loads of drive, excitement, you lose a little bit of body weight. Then week 2 comes and that dampens a little bit, you lose a little bit less. Then week 3, it descends even more. By week 4, you feel like you've completely lost all motivation and you think you've got a problem on your hands. You ask yourself, why am I not motivated? You start skipping meals, you start skipping the gym, you start missing sessions, start eating more junk food. Then the next thing you know, you're looking for the next shiny object and the whole cycle repeats itself. You think, I don't want it bad enough, or I just need to try harder. The reality is that you'll always be motivated to do something, but some forms of motivation are just stronger than others. Some are internal and others are external. So in a scenario like this, the 5 whys exercise can be really useful. This is something that I used a lot when I worked at Amazon. So you start with your goal. For example, I want to lose 30 pounds body fat. Then you ask why. Your answer might be because I want to be more healthy now and in the future. Then you ask why again. Because I don't have the energy to do the things that I want to do and I'm concerned about the trajectory of my overall health. Then you ask, why is that important to you? And your answer might be because I want to show up and be present for my family, but also still be able to do the things that I want to do, like build a business or career that I want. Then you ask, why is that important? And so on. You ask why 5 times to get deeper and deeper and stronger sense of motivation for change. This doesn't mean that some days you won't want to take action, but there's already lots of situations in your life where you do things not because you always feel motivated, but because you know they're important. Things like eating vegetables, going to work on a cold or rainy day, having difficult conversations, you get the drift. Too many pop psychology and motivational channels simplify motivation to the point where we think we should always feel good about doing hard but important things. Now, cognitive distortion number 4 is the all or nothing perfectionist mindset. This is a major one, and on a side note, this is an area that I am researching at a doctorate level. Think of it this way: if you're on a diet, you can also be off a diet. Although it might seem really subtle, the way that you speak to yourself is really important. Losing fat is straightforward, but it's not easy, because if it was, I wouldn't be making this video and you wouldn't be watching it. It's safe to assume that doing anything difficult pushes our boundaries, and from time to time we'll push too hard or we'll push too far and we'll have setbacks. The problem with striving for perfection is that people often believe that in order to make progress they need to be perfect, and if they're not perfect it means they're terrible. It's very black or white. And once you're terrible and you've crossed that line of perfection, you hit what I call the big red fuck it button. So you write the day off, you say, I'll start fresh tomorrow, or start fresh on Monday, or next week, or next January, whatever it is, and the same thing happens over and over and over. This can happen on a micro scale, such as eating 1 piece of chocolate or drinking 1 beer that wasn't part of the plan, so you feel like you failed, and because you failed, you may as well have 10. Or it can happen on a more macro scale. This month isn't great because I've got my birthday in 2 weeks and then I've got a vacation next month, so I'll start at 3 months when it can be perfect, only for the same thing to happen month after month, year after year. The antidote to this is to set the bar appropriately low. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Jordan Peterson. I think he's gone a bit mad, although I did go to his very first seminar when he came to Ireland. But I do have to credit him here for this. He talks about making your bed in his book, 12 Rules for Life. It's essentially a metaphor for doing something small and building on positive feedback loops. Instead of setting yourself up for failure each week with extremely difficult tasks, set goals that are appropriately low. Then once you achieve them, you can build on them. You need to prove to yourself that you can do it. It might be as simple as preparing your food for 3 days of the week or doing a walk twice a week. If you set the goals too high, you won't achieve them, you'll stop, because who wants to feel like a failure when they're trying to do difficult things? The final cognitive distortion, and I see this daily with the clients that I work with as it's extremely common, is discounting the positive. As humans, our brains are hardwired from an evolutionary perspective to be negative, as it was crucial for survival. So we're always hyper aware of our threats and challenges. Let's say maybe 5 days of the week you ate well, 2 weren't great, and instead of the 2 pounds goal that you wanted, you only lost 1 pound of fat. Hyper fixating on those 2 bad days rather than the 5 good days only leads us to feel worse about ourselves, feeding into that perfectionist mindset. And whilst reflection is really important and necessary in order to try and avoid similar mistakes in the future, if we judge our whole experience through a negative rather than a positive lens, it only reinforces that negative self-criticism. Imagine a school child who was trying really hard to get all A grades, and at the end of the semester when they came out with their little envelope and the results, you scan through to see 5 A's and 2 B's. And the first thing that you did was chastise them for getting the 2 B's rather than looking at the 5 A's. This builds up a negative feedback loop and decreases the desire to be persistent with the hard work that the child was doing to get those 5 A's. It's exactly the same when it comes to fat loss. As you can see, a lot of these have similarities, and if you feel like you engage in one, then you probably engage in many of them. It all really boils down to setting up an environment where you can be consistent for a long enough period of time, even when you don't really feel like it, accepting that there will be setbacks and that you won't feel good about those setbacks, and finding ways to reinforce the positive things that you are doing. In the health and fitness industry, there's a major emphasis on tracking whether it's calories, sleep, HRV, body weight, but very little focus on the common denominator in all of your failures, and that's you. You see, it doesn't matter what method or diet you follow. If it's a mindset that's holding you back, then you need to consider tracking that. Let me know what you thought the biggest takeaway was. What's the one that you struggle with? Are there any others that you can think of? If you feel like you need some help with these, you want some accountability, then check out my one-to-one coaching program. The details are in the video description. And if you liked the video and want more videos like this, then hit the subscribe button, and I will see you in the next video.